we talking about the same universalism while this was going on? Why not ask Rob Bell himself? This was the charge being leveled at him. A few months ago, in a magazine interview, someone came out and just asked him the question outright. Based on your understanding of universalism, they asked, do you consider yourself a universalist? No, I don't. And you see the difference being what? Asked the interviewer. My observation would be, he said, that people mean lots of different things with that word. I think for some people, apparently the word means nothing matters. It doesn't matter what you believe. It doesn't matter how you live. Nothing matters. And I simply don't believe that. Certain paths are destructive. Certain paths are wrong. Certain paths cause all kinds of toxic harm to other people. And that's not loving your neighbor. So if by universalism people mean it doesn't matter, that's just complete rubbish, so no. Secondly, he says, sometimes when people say the word universalism, I think they mean that at some point God just swoops everybody up into heaven, like, come on everybody, everybody's in. And the problem with that, he says, is that I believe love wins, and the very nature of love is freedom. So if at any point God co-opts your ability to choose, we no longer are dealing with a loving God. And if there are people who are in heaven who don't want to be there, then that's not heaven. It's like God saying, it's party everybody, and you're going to like it. So there's two potential definitions of the word universalism. And are either of them even remotely close to what we mean when we say it? He gets at the notion of universal salvation, certainly that historical theology that feeds where it is we've come from, but the word has come to mean so much more in our movement today. In fact, it probably means different things to different people sitting here in this room now. After all, if we can't agree on the meaning of a simple word like person inside our circle, how much more difficult is it to come to a consensus about the idea of universalism? There seems to be today, in the realm of religious dialogue, grave misunderstanding. It may be that we don't really know what we're talking about. The statistics about membership in UU congregations, there's that word, is that about 90% of us have come here from other places. Either we meandered in on our own, or we were running screaming from somewhere else and trying to escape, but we came from elsewhere. Not all of us, but many of us. Which means we tend to define what we are as a believing person in terms of what that isn't. Even if we are able to define ourselves as a believing creature in positive terms, we still know that that's not it. And we know what we reject. But how well do we know it? How well do we understand what it is we're saying no to? A few months back, Paul Krugman, the economist, gave an interview in which he said that people who were politically liberal were perfectly capable of understanding the conservative point of view, but the conservatives were completely incapable of understanding the liberal point of view. Might seem that way sometimes. Brian Kaplan, another economist, a professor of economy at George Mason University, read that interview and said, no, wait a minute. Kaplan's got a little bit more of a libertarian bent and had a little more faith in his ability to understand the other side. He said, perhaps we really need to put that idea to the test. Who really understands who here? Perhaps we need to develop an ideological Turing test. Now, in the realm of computer science, a Turing test is how we test to see how close we've come to artificial intelligence in a computer, how well a computer can pass as a human being in a conversation. Kaplan's idea for the ideological Turing test was to see how well, say, a liberal could pass off as a conservative, answering questions from the conservative vantage point in conservative language. See how easily they could fool the other side, how well they understood the other side. Now, I don't know if anyone's taken Kaplan on in the realm of politics to see whether or not the test works or not. But in the religious world, this idea took off a little bit this summer. Leah Libresco, an atheist blogger, decided to take on the ideological Turing test this past summer. She writes a blog called Unequally Yoked, subtitled Geeky Atheist Picks Fights with Her Catholic Boyfriend. She was intrigued by this idea of the ideological Turing test and decided to apply it to the religious sphere. She had lots of Christian friends, she had lots of atheist friends. She decided to get together and see just how well they could try to pass off as one another. So she developed a series of questions for Christians and a series of questions for atheists. Very simple questions, nothing deeply theological or too intellectual. What evidence or experience would cause you to stop believing in God? What's your best reason for being a Christian on one side? What's your best reason for being an atheist on the other side? What evidence or experience would cause you to believe in God? So on. Very simple questions. And she asked everybody to answer all the questions as though they were speaking from the vantage point of the person being interviewed. So all of the Christians had to answer the atheist questions as if they were atheists, and all of the atheists had to answer the Christian questions as if they were Christians. And then she opened up the answers to the entire internet so that folks who self-identified as atheists would read the atheist answers and see if they could pick out who was fooling and who wasn't. And the same for the Christians. The results were interesting. Of all the Christians who tried to pass themselves off as atheists in the Turing test, only 2 could do it with any sort of regularity, anything more than about 60% of the respondents. Only 1 atheist was able to pass off as a Christian. Most were caught right out by the Christian leaders. Now, the survey wasn't the most scientifically conducted thing, and the statistics might not be significant, but they do point to what I'm trying to say today. We don't understand one another as well as we think we do. We're proud of our minds. We like to think we can understand what's going on. We think we know everything. In reality, probably nobody knows nothing. Or at the very least, we just don't do well articulating what the other side has to say. This is the danger of the inside language. If we can't leave it on the inside, if we get too focused on the language we speak here, the shorthand, we get caught in epistemic closure. That's inside language from the seminary. That means the echo chamber. We get lost to a point where we start to think of the inside language as the only language. And in the process, we lose the use of perfectly good words that we might think we don't need anymore. But in losing them, we lose the tools to communicate. And I'm here to say this morning that we have to start doing a better job understanding the language of the people we think we disagree with, the people we do disagree with. Why? The cynic in me would say that it's important to know your enemy. But that's a cynical answer. Kind of bleak. Suggests we're at war, and I don't think that's necessarily what the situation is. That kind of thinking puts us into a bunker mentality, and that's not who we as a community have said we want to be. It's important, at least for me, to understand the language of the person outside my circle, because frankly, I love us. I love the idea of Unitarian Universalism. I love who we are as a congregational community. And I want to be able to talk to people about it. And I want to be able to talk with people who are not necessarily you. Don't take that the wrong way. It's not that I don't love y'all kids. But I want to be able to talk to someone who hasn't been inside the circle already. I want to talk to someone who will be surprised and amazed and intrigued by what it is that we have to say. And I can't do that if I can't speak their language. Communication without understanding that language just becomes circular. A lot of noise and no understanding.